Hello, fellow book readers. My name is John, and today I want to talk about my top 10 favorite fantasy book series. So I have read, or dabbled in at least close to 40 different fantasy series. Some I've read completely, and there's only a few, very few I haven't finished, but there's only a few that I haven't, finished yet, but I've dabbled enough into where I would be able to say, if I liked them or hated them or rank them if I wanted to. I do plan on making yearly top 10 series lists because I can see this list changing. I have some like really highly rated series on my TBR for next year. So it's totally possible this will change. But as of today, this is going to be my top 10 favorite fantasy series. Now, I do think my list will be a little bit different from some others that you would see in the BookTube sphere because I like to dabble in like different subgenres of fantasy. I don't just read plainly epic fantasy the entire time. Now, a lot or even most of these are epic fantasy, but not all of them. And I think that's sort of unique among especially the fantasy sphere of BookTube. So that's one of the reasons I want to make this list, but just because I want to keep track of where I am at. But anyway, there will be spoilers when I talk about these series. I'm just going to give like sort of a brief overview of these series with, some slight spoilers I'm sure will come up. So just keep that in mind. I will list the series down below that I'm going to talk about. But the first book series at number 10, and we're going to go 10 to 1. At number 10, my 10th favorite fantasy series is Mistborn Era 1 by Brandon Sanderson. This was my first Sanderson, and I have to say I think it holds up really well. Now, I will say that some people, I've heard this talked about by some people to be like an introduction into fantasy. I don't think the series is that. I don't think this is a great introduction into fantasy. Book 1 is very slow. The beginning takes a while to get into. But the series overall has a great arc with some great twists, some great turns. I think it has really great character work. And I'm somebody who doesn't really enjoy Vin, the main character of this series, that much. But I do like all the characters around her. Like I said, Elend is one of my favorite characters I've ever read. He's just outside my top 10. If you go watch my top 10 favorite fantasy character list, he was an honorable mention. I think Sadie's is perfect. I really like the humor that some of the other characters bring, like Breeze or Ham. The antagonist here is really good and well thought out. Both the antagonist in book 1 and in book 3. Now, there are some parts of this book, like I said, that the reason it's number 10, not higher, is I do think book 1's a little bit slow, and there's an arc in book 3 that I don't really like that much. But, again, that's not a huge deal. Overall, this is a very good series, and I did give every book in the series 4 stars or above, with book 2 being 5 stars. I think Wall of Ascension is the best book in the series, which is, I heard, an unpopular opinion, because I heard book 2 is usually people's least favorite. But I think book 2 kind of reminds me of A Song of Ice and Fire a little bit. There's a lot of politics. Obviously, it's not as dark, but there's a lot of politics going on. And it still is pretty dark. So yeah, that's my opinion on this. Oh, and the magic system. I think the magic system in here is lovely. The world building, also pretty good, although I will say that Scadrial is not my favorite, like, Sanderson world or even my favorite fantasy world. But still very good world building, especially culture-wise. I think that's where the world building really rules in Mistborn. Number 9 is a book series that I actually don't have the physical books to. I read them all on my Kindle because they were all free on Kindle Unlimited. I read them earlier this summer, actually. Number 9 would be The Witcher Saga by Andrzej Sapkowski. Now, I did say I gave a 5-star rating to one of the Mistborn books. None of the Witcher books got 5 stars from me. So why is it ahead? I think the quality of the 4-star books are just a little bit higher for me. And I really love the versatility of this series because you got 2 short story collections, and then you got sort of this epic fantasy, 5-book epic fantasy like series novels that tell like the story of the Witcher and Ciri. And I think that really worked. I think the combination of the short stories and the novels really pushed it ahead of the Mistborn for me. I'm somebody who really likes short stories, so I really loved those 2 first books, those short story books, especially book 1, The Last Wish, was a 4-star book for me, and I loved it. But the novels also did a lot of work, because the novels is really where you get to know Ciri. And I know a lot of people don't love that. They don't love that the actual Witcher novels aren't as much about Geralt as they are about Ciri, but I loved Ciri. Ciri's my favorite character in the series, and I think she really shines. And I think Time of Contempt and Tower of Swallows are both 4-star books, but they're like bordering 4.5 stars. They're like really great. I love those two books, and the other books really deliver too. I did think Lady of the Lake is not my type of book. Like, it's not my favorite. I don't love Lady of the Lake. It got a little bit too weird for me, but the quality of the other 6 books in the series all really deliver for me. Like, I really enjoyed all of the other 6 books in the series a lot. I love how it's sort of a Monster Hunter series in the beginning, and then it turns into like a literary fantasy the rest of the way with some really great character work. And again, I am a character reader for the most part, so I enjoyed the character work that went on in this series, especially Ciri and Geralt. But I also thought, you had Yennefer was a very good character. I thought Regis was a really good character. Obviously, you got the harp player, Dandelion, awesome character. There's just so many good characters. Triss, I really like Triss. I know some people don't like Triss, but I love Triss. Yeah, The Witcher delivered for me in a lot of different ways. I think it's really the first like literary fantasy that I really enjoyed a lot, and I would say the last 5 books are more of a literary fantasy than like an epic fantasy or anything of that ilk. But it does have some epic fantasy vibes with the war going on in the background. So if you're interested in that, it delivers on that too. Okay, and then number 8 is the Shepherd King duology by Rachel Gillig. That comprises One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns. Two Twisted Crowns is one of my favorite books I've ever read. One day I'll do like I want to do like a top 100 books list one day, but I have to organize it, I should say. And I want to read a little bit more series before I make that list. But Two Twisted Crowns would probably be in my top 10. It would definitely be in my top 15. That book rules in a lot of different ways. But One Dark Window is also 5 stars. I gave both of these books 5 stars. So why is it not higher on the list when I think this is a perfect series? It's a duology. It feels a little like cheating. It almost feels like it's not even a series. But it is a series. It's more than one book. So it's on the list. It's number 8. I think this series is awesome. Great series. It's not really a romantasy, although it kind of has romantic elements to it, but every fantasy series has romantic elements to it. It really is sort of just this epic fantasy with a lot at stake here. Or maybe epic's not the right word. Maybe it's more just a high fantasy. But it really delivers in a lot of different ways, I feel like. And I think the characters are just awesome, and I love the rhyming, and the Nightmare, the companion, he's just so good. Rachel Gillig is just one of my favorite writers. Every book I've read of hers has delivered. All 3 of them have either been 5 stars or 4.5 stars. I think I gave Night in the Moth 4.5, but it's as close to 5 as you can get. It's basically just One Dark Window with a little bit more romance. These books rule. She's a master of writing settings, these gothic sort of gray, gray sort of gothic settings just really, really work, and they're like so aesthetically, I don't know if pleasing is the right word, but you can see them in your mind. She's such a master of writing the atmosphere. That's another thing. This book's sort of an atmospheric fantasy, and I really like that about it. This book series just rules, and if you haven't read it because you're afraid it's like just a romance, it's not for you, just give it a shot. Trust me, these books are really good. Okay, at number 7 would be the Middle-earth Tolkien series by J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, I will say if this was just Lord of the Rings, it probably wouldn't make my top 10. I think Fellowship is not a weak book. I just don't think it's aged very good, and it's pacing-wise, it's not fun to read, especially the first 40-ish% of the book, up until they meet Glorfindel on the way to Rivendell. That book is really tough to get through, and I don't think those parts are particularly good. Everything from when they meet Glorfindel to the end is fabulous, and I think Two Towers is a pretty perfect book, but I think Return of the King also suffers from some of that Fellowship thing where there's parts of it that are just kind of a drag. But those books are still good. Like I said, they're still good to very good. But that on its own isn't enough to get into the top 10. But then you throw in The Hobbit, which is my favorite standalone of all time. It's an easy 5 stars. And you throw in The Silmarillion, which is a 4-star masterpiece. It's great. I can't quite give it 5 stars because it's not really a story so much as it is a collection of different stories. But it's the best history/mythology, fake history/fake mythology book I've ever read. It's so good. So you throw in The Hobbit, you throw in The Silmarillion, you just throw in how much it influenced everything, and you throw in The Two Towers, which is a perfect book, and just the story of Lord of the Rings, which is still fabulous, even if I thought some of the books were a bit of a drag. It's an easy number 7 for me. I mean, like I said, The Hobbit's my favorite standalone of all time. So yeah, I have no problem putting this at 7. I just do think some people tend to overrate it a little bit when they put it in like the top 5. Like I think there's been better series that have been written since, or not better, but series that have aged better, I should say, than Lord of the Rings has. But this is still, top 10, 7 for me, and it's 7 pretty easily. It's definitely above the 3 I ranked below it. And number 6 is this is going to be a series that no one else in this fantasy sphere has on their top 10, but I love this series. It's Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies series, or just the Emily Wilde series. I don't know what the actual title of the series is, but it's a trilogy of 3 books where Emily Wilde is a professor at Cambridge, and she's studying dryadology, fairies, and she's writing the first ever encyclopedia on fairies in the first book. And the second book, she's making the first ever map of fairylands. And in the third book, she is making a compendium of lost tales that the fairy kingdoms have. And these books really rule. They're just written in like the perfect like journal form, and it has some really top-notch humor. I love the contrast of the characters of Wendell, the other dryadology professor who's actually a fairy king, or fairy prince, I should say. And Emily, who's just this sort of dry, sort of humorless, but she is funny because that's like sort of her thing. She's humorless, but she's funny. Because of that, their chemistry is really, really good. This is sort of a romantasy, but not really. It definitely turns into one by the third book, but the first book is really not at all. And it's this perfect blend of cozy fantasy with like high fantasy, epic fantasy stakes towards the end of the book, if that makes sense. This first book is my favorite in the series. It's an easy 5 stars, but I also think the third book's 5 stars. I think the second book's great too. I gave the second book 4 stars, I think. They all rule. The side characters in these are great. The atmosphere in these books are great. The first book is in this like Nordic island off the coast of Norway, and the ice snow vibes are just perfect. And then the fairies in this book are creepy, and they're written more like fairies from like the mythology. They're written more like mythology fairies that you would see back in the old days than they are in like the new fairies that you see kind of written today. And that really rules here. They're scary, creepy, but they're perfect. And like I said, this book can go from just like cozy fantasy to like horror in like an instant almost. And I really like that about this book. And I think Heather Fawcett's just a very underrated writer. She's very, very, very good. Writes some great characters. The character of Poe as a side character, just this like little short fairy that lives in a tree. He's so funny, so mean, so grumpy. It's perfect. I love this series. Okay, number 5 for me is the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. Now these I consider these to be like the modern epic fantasy of our times, right? That's what it is. These books are super long. They're just epic fantasy, epic fantasy. That's what it is. Like, how much epic fantasy can I fit into a book? Let's do it. It's like, if Lord of the Rings was like the epic fantasy of the early epic fantasy, then Wheel of Time was sort of the epic fantasy of the 90s. This is today's epic fantasy. It just rules. It delivers on everything. The first 4 books, I think, are all great to perfect. Like, Way of Kings, this book is a little slow, but it doesn't feel like it drags ever, if that makes sense. It's like the right kind of slow. Words of Radiance is one of the best books that's ever been written in terms of epic fantasy. That book is this book on steroids, pretty much. I think Oathbringer is a little bit of a step down for me, but it's still great. I gave it 4 stars. The last like 600 pages of that book are batshit crazy. And then I really loved Rhythm of War. I gave it 4 stars. Every arc in Rhythm of War I thought was great, and I loved it. Wind and Truth, though, has definitely knocked the series down from my top 4 to 5 to number 5. Like I think Wind and Truth left a sour note in my mouth. I still gave it 3 stars, but to me that book is weak. It's just not very good. It's a little bit it is good, but to me there were parts of that book that had glaring problems that not only for this book, which I thought was good for the future of the series. I go into the 6th book with trepidation. Now I do believe Brandon can get the series back on track when he writes it in 10 years, but the way the 5th book ended, I just didn't love. I'm worried that the rest of the series is going to keep going downhill. So that's why it's number 5 instead of higher. But like I said, I think this book series is must read. It's the epic fantasy of our era, and it has some really good character work. Shallan is a top 10 character for me. Kaladin's awesome. Dalinar's awesome. Adolin is great character. Jasna, perfect character. I do think the antagonist is a little bit weak, but he's still very good. And the world building here is top notch. Again, Sanderson with the magic system. He goes all out on the magic systems. This one's very good, but I do think it's a little bit less strict than, say, the Mistborn magic system, if that makes sense. It's a little bit less explained, but it's still very, very good. So, yeah, that's where I am at with Stormlight. These books are long, but they're great and well worth the read. Top 5 series for me. It's number 5. It would be higher if the last book was just a little bit better for me. Okay, number 4 is another series I read this year. Like I said, the epic fantasy series of the 90s was Wheel of Time. I agree, and I love it. I love it so much. It's number 4 for me. It barely misses out on the top 3, but to be fair, the top 3 all have sort of like personal reasons for them being top 3. This one doesn't really have any personal reason other than I just thought it was great. Like, this series is great. Now, I don't love Eye of the World, and I think the last book is just good, not great. And I do think Crossroads of Twilight is sort of just a mad book too. But there's 15 books in this series. If only 3 of them I have like issues with, then the series delivers, because so much of the series is just great. Like books 2 through 8, in my opinion, like that's a 7-book stretch, and I think all those books deliver. They're all great or perfect. There's one perfect book in there, but really 2 perfect books in there, and then like 6 just great books, and they don't drag at all, even though they're quite long, and you grow to care about these characters. They're not just, he doesn't just throw like 3 or 4 characters. There's that whole cast in it. There's something like over 1,000 named characters in this series, and you'll get to love a lot of them, and you get to know a lot of them very well. And this has some of my favorite characters. It has 2 of my favorite characters of all time, just period. Egwene's my number 4 favorite fantasy character, and Rand is my number 6 favorite fantasy character. I love those 2 characters. I think Rand's the best chosen one ever written. I think Egwene is just like a perfect character. I know she gets a lot of hate, but she shouldn't. As a character reader, I loved reading their journeys front to back. I think this book series has a lot of twists, a lot of turns, has really good antagonists, some great world building. I love the world building in this series. I love the map. Just everything about the series I love. There isn't really much negative. Like I said, there's 2 books that I thought were not great and not very good, and then there was the end of the series I didn't like love. I actually loved the way the book ended, but I just didn't love some of the choices he made in A Memory of Light. So yeah, Robert Jordan, one of my favorite writers ever, for sure. This is a masterpiece, classic. You should read it. Number 4 for me. I know some people will say there's been better written since. That's fine. My opinion, this series still holds up today. I don't think it's aged poorly at all. Okay. And like I said, the top 3 all have like personal reasons for being in the top 3 for me. And like I said, I don't see any of them dropping out of the top 3, maybe ever, just because of those reasons. But this is the series that got me back into reading in 2024. You know, I had started getting back in late 2023 when I reread Lord of the Rings and some of the other Middle-earth books. But then I did take like 5 months off, and I was like, I had this book series. I had the first book of the series sitting on my bookshelf because I had bought it I bought it the year before in 2023. And I finally picked it up and read it, and I devoured this series. That's Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. This is sort of a young adult epic fantasy with a sort of it has a larger romance plotline than you would see in other epic fantasies, I'll say, but I wouldn't call it a romantasy at all. That being said, I think this series starts out very young adult, and it moves into like new adult, or even just plain out adult by Queen of Shadows by book 4 or 5 if you're counting the prequel. Yeah, this series, just the personal connection, not the personal connection, the fact that it got me back into reading, that means a lot to me. And I still think about events that happen in this series all the time. I think Sarah J. Maas is a great character writer, and I am a character reader, so a lot of these characters, they have stuck with me. I think Aelin's, I had Aelin number 2, I think. No, number 3 in my favorite fantasy character lists, and yeah, she's just a great character, all-time great. But I think others like Dorian, Manon, Kale, Elide. There's just so many great characters in this series. I'll just end up listing them all if I keep going over all the great characters. I don't want to do that, but I think the plot here is also just really strong. I think she's shown she could write action scenes in this series. There's a ton of good action in here. There's a ton of good twists. Yeah, and the world building here is pretty good. Now you could tell she's not much of a George R. R. Martin talks about architects and gardeners. She's definitely more of a gardener than an architect, and you can tell that at times, but that doesn't really bother me because she's a self-admitted gardener. Like she has talked about how she does not believe in like strict outlines. That doesn't mean she doesn't outline her work. She clearly does. But that being said, this series I think is just a really good introduction to fantasy. Like if we're talking what series is a great introduction to fantasy, what is a great gateway series? I think it's this one. I think this is my favorite of the gateway series. Not even think I know it's my favorite, and I love, gateway fantasy in general. So yeah, there was no doubt this was ever going to be high on my list, and it got me back into reading. I'll always remember that about this series. Okay, number 2, the series that got me into reading fantasy, and that would be Harry Potter. Now I know this is not like the most high quality fantasy ever written, but in terms of children, and like I said, I like all subgenres of fantasy. In terms of children's fantasy, and even young adult fantasy, because it definitely transitions into a young adult fantasy about Goblet of Fire. I would even call Prisoner of Azkaban like young adult. This series is top notch. It has some great character work, some great arcs, some great stakes, some really, really, really lovely world building, despite the fact that it takes place in the real world, kinda. But she's able to turn it into sort of a portal fantasy, which is really fun. And you'll know that I'm a sort of an OG Harry Potter fan. As you can see, this is my Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone edition that my parents bought me in 1999. It still has the price sticker on it from Walmart. $4.89. You could buy books for $4.89 back then. $4.84, I should say. It's insane. This book's very worn. I've read it a ton of different times. I've actually since bought a new edition of Sorcerer's Stone in hardback just because I want to match the rest of. So I had every other Harry Potter book in hardcover, so I wanted to match it. But this is my original Sorcerer's Stone edition from 1999. This series got me into reading, and once I got into it, I didn't stop for like a decade. I was reading book after book after book. Not a lot of it wasn't fantasy that I was reading, but I had always like gone back and reread Harry Potter, and I remember where I was when Order of the Phoenix came out, and I remember where I was when Half-Blood Prince came out. I remember where I was when Deathly Hallows came out. Those were like worldwide events almost, and I devoured those books. I still love the story. I love the theming. That love is sort of like the most powerful of magic there is. I love the characters. Albus Dumbledore is my favorite fantasy character I've ever read. I think, some of the other children are really great, especially like Hermione. I think Fred and George. Well, I love Ron even though he's kind of, a wimp. But he has some really humorous moments. Some of the other teachers, I think Snape is the first great character I ever read. I really like Snape. McGonagall, really good character. Hagrid, really good. Harry's sort of an insert yourself your character, but I think that's perfect. That's what the series was going for. Yeah, I just can't talk enough about how much I think Harry Potter is a great introduction to fantasy, but also how much it meant to me in my reading journey. Like, this series, I still think about the series today, 26 years later. 26 years. I read Sorcerer's Stone in 1999. And the last one that has a personal connection to me, I had stopped reading, I would say somewhere around like 2009-ish, around there. Where I had stopped reading like completely. I was reading nonfiction from like 2009 to 2015. I was reading purely nonfiction. So I won't say I wasn't reading, but I was reading a lot of nonfiction, a lot of sports nonfiction, a lot of history nonfiction, just nonfiction. That's what I was on. I was on a nonfiction kick. And then I remember where I was. I watched in, I think it was May, or it might have been June of 2015. I watched the first 5 seasons of Game of Thrones. And if you remember, there was a 1 year, going into season 6 was the first year they did like a big gap. So it was more than a year. It was 2 years until season 6 came out. And they announced that fairly early on. I was like, what am I going to do? I just binged this whole series. I have to find something connected to it to do. And I was like, what if I just read the books? I haven't read fiction in a long time. I certainly never read an epic fantasy series that was this big with this many pages, all the books were very thick. Let's try it. And at that point, I was still more of like the kids' fantasy side of things, or even like the young adult more than the adult fantasy. So I picked up Game of Thrones, and that's my number one series. Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones. I devoured the first 4 books. I read the first the first 3 books in I think 4 months, which was for me an accomplishment at the time. Today, that wouldn't be much of an accomplishment because I read a lot faster, but for me, that was an accomplishment at the time. I took a small break, and then I read the 4th book, and then I took like a year break, and then I read the 5th book. Yeah, I just love this series. I think every book delivers. I think it's my favorite television show of all time, but the books are even better, especially, Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons. They do a much better job than like seasons 5 and 6 do of telling that story. I just love some of the characters in this series. The characters in this series rule. George is a great character writer, just awesome character writer with some very good dialogue. This is the first time I experienced like dialogue that I thought was, like otherworldly. George writes amazing dialogue. I think the world building in the series is like top notch. Like Westeros, I can see Westeros in my head. I can't tell you how like hard that is for some authors to do, but George makes it very easy. Westeros is dialed in my head. I love Westeros. It's my favorite map of all time, I think. Fantasy map. Sorry, Middle Earth, you're number 2, but Westeros is definitely my favorite. Like I said, the character work here is just amazing. Jaime is my second favorite fantasy character of all time. I love Jaime Lannister. Eddard's in my top 10. If you go extended, I think Daemon Targaryen is just an awesome character in Fire and Blood. I love Arya. I love Sansa. Eddard. I already said Eddard, didn't I? Jon Snow is perfect. I think Daenerys is great. Obviously, Tyrion. You get some of the other characters, some of the more side characters, I think, really rule too. There's tons of mysteries here, tons of twists and turns. Yeah, this book series isn't even finished, and it's my number 1 series. I would love Winds of Winter to come out. I would love to read that book, but I am not somebody who is going to be trashing George, because the 5 books plus other like side books he's given us in the series all rule. They're all perfect. They're all so good. There isn't even like just a good book in the series. Every book is either great or perfect. He's just a fabulous writer. I don't know what else to say. Like, this is the epic fantasy series of our time. I won't say epic because it is epic fantasy, but it's different kind of epic fantasy. It's some people call it grimdark. I don't know if I'd call it that, but it is definitely darker than other fantasy series you'll read. But it's just so good. It's so endearing, and the action is really good too. But don't think this book series is just all action. It's a lot more character work and emotion than it is action. But the action that they do give you is really, really good. Yeah, I can't say it enough how much I love this series. And it's a low magic series. There's not a ton there magic-wise. And when you think fantasy, a lot of people are like, oh, I need the magic. Trust me, don't. Read A Song of Ice and Fire. And I don't know why I'm saying read it. I'm sure you all have. But if you haven't, read it. The series is great. It's my number 1 of all time. And like I said, it got me back into reading in 2015. I got out of reading again by probably about 2018, 2019. Before I got back into it again last year in 2024. So that's my top 10. If we go in order, I'll go over them again. Number 10, we got Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. Number 9, we got The Witcher by Andrzej Sapkowski. Number 8, we got the Shepherd King duology by Rachel Gillig. Number 7, we got the Tolkien universe. Not just the Lord of the Rings. You got to have the whole Tolkien universe in there by J.R.R. Tolkien. Number 6, you got the Emily Wilde series by Heather Fawcett. Number 5, you get the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. Number 4, you got Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. Number 3, you got Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Number 2, we got Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. And number 1, we got A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. That's my top 10 favorite series of all time for 2025. Now, like I said, I am definitely going to make this video again next year, and there might be some changes. Who knows? There's a lot of fantasy series on the list next year that I can't wait to get to. Dresden Files, The Dark Tower, First Law, among others. There's others in there that I'm definitely going to get to, but those are 3 of the mainstays for sure that I want to tackle next year. That's my 2025 top 10. I think it's a little bit different than, especially like 10 through 6, than other top 10 videos will be, just because like I said, I like to read a lot of different subgenres of fantasy. I will be making a top 10 standalone video sometime in the next 3 months before the end of the year. I can't wait to make that because I have a lot of thoughts about that. I've been reading a lot of standalones this year. So, yeah, that'll be fun too. But anyway, let me know what your top 10 are down below. If you agree, disagree with any of my top 10.